Okay, welcome to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time, Masechet Bava Kamma. This week is our 16th class, and we're going to be reviewing Daf 105 through 111. Daf 105 tells us that if an item is still there, meaning it was stolen, and we don't know, again, if it's still there, then you need to return it. But again, it depends on what our case is. Let's say a person stole 2 bundles that together were worth a pruta. Again, a pruta is the lowest denomination for something being seen as theft. Let's say, right, do we look at it as the theft of a pruta, or do we see it as 2 halves, and therefore it's not seen as theft individually, and therefore you should return both of them, even one after the other, meaning because together they make one item which is worth a pruta. The next case is the case of a Nazir. If you remember, we learned in Masechet Nazir about the Nazir having to shave his head. And it says that if he has to shave all his hair, let's say he has 2 hairs left, so you need to shave them, even if he does one at a time. So this shows that even though individually it wouldn't be considered the requisite amount, together it is. The same case with a hole that was sealed up in between 2 floors, it needs to be less than a tefach. So if you seal up half of it, so then you've reduced the size and it is a valid seal. Let's say a person stole chametz, right? Unleavened, leavened bread, right? Bread. A person stole it on Pesach or before Pesach, and now after Pesach, can you just return the item? Now, this item is forbidden to have any use with it, right? You can't eat it, you can't do anything with it because it's chametz that existed over Pesach. Again, it wasn't sold to anybody, but rather it was stolen. So if he swears falsely about it, does he have to pay an extra fifth and bring a korban? Meaning, do we see it as something valuable, even though really it doesn't have any value, right? Again, maybe because it doesn't have any value, then not. But again, because the item exists, even though it doesn't have value, it's still seen as an item, and therefore you do need to pay it back, and you do need to pay the fifth and bring a sacrifice. The Gemara continues and says that if a person swears falsely, but only partially, right? So let's say someone says, you stole my cow. And then the other person says, no, I just borrowed it. So you're acknowledging that you have the cow, but you're saying, no, I got it, you gave it to me, right? Or it just came to my house. So this is in essence, he is admitting that he has the cow, but that he didn't steal it. So this person is not liable to pay the fifth and bring the sacrifice. That's only if the item is still there. But if the item isn't there, again, you wouldn't have to pay any of it. So let's say there are basically 3 oaths, right? One is he could say, I knew it was lost, but I didn't find it. Or someone can say that they found the object, but they didn't know whose it was, so they couldn't return it. Or they didn't know anything about the object or who found it. So the question is, are these seen as someone who's liable to pay for the item or not? Okay, let's say a person received what's called in Hebrew a pikadon, right? A collateral, an item they were going to watch. So let's say you have that, they have to watch it till he returns it. Again, only if he makes a false oath, or even if he didn't swear about it. Or he did, but there were witnesses. Again, if the person admits to either losing or stealing this collateral, this pikadon, then you need to pay a fifth, plus bring the sacrifice, the korban asham. Okay, the suspected person has the right to swear and then be exempt, right? If a person says, you owe me, right? I lent this to you or you stole it, and the person says, no, I didn't. If they take the oath, they're exempt for paying. But if the person is suspected to swear falsely, meaning we can't trust the person's oath, so then they cannot swear. The Gemara also says that in this case, because that person can't swear to be exempt, then the owner can take an oath to say, I swear that this person, right, this person owes me this item. You can swear and then take the item, because again, the suspect isn't believed to take an oath, whereas the affected party is believed, and therefore that person can take the oath. Let's say a person denies a loan. It's still valid. That person is still valid to be a witness. Again, we're talking about someone who is swearing falsely. The Gemara, I think very sensitively is saying, right, if you say I owe you $100 and I say no, I don't, really I could be saying I don't have the money, and therefore it's not really saying that I'm not trustworthy. It's basically saying I'm trying to buy myself time so that I can pay you back. However, if somebody denied a pikadon, again, pikadon is an item that they're holding as collateral, that you know that they have, and they say that they don't. So then that person is disqualified from being a witness because they're lying. Okay, Daf 106 tells us that if Shimon swears that he doesn't owe Reuven money, and then witnesses come and say that he does, the Gemara tells us that Shimon does not have to pay it back because Reuven already accepted the oath that he took. Right? He accepted, okay, fine, you swore, you don't owe me money, okay, fine. Because he accepted it, Shimon now acquires the money and therefore does not have to pay Reuven back if later on we find out that Reuven that he does owe Reuven money. If a person swears that he doesn't owe him any money, so again, we said he's exempt from payment because the owner accepted the oath. This is the case only for a loan, but not for a pikadon. Again, we're going back and forth between a loan, which is, I don't have the money to pay you back, so I'm going to say I don't have it, or I never borrowed it, versus a pikadon. When we're talking about a pikadon, so then you know that you left your watch, your gold bracelet, you know you left that with the person. So when they say they don't have it, that means they lost it, stole it, something happened to it. So there you always have to pay it back. Another opinion is no, even with a pikadon, you might be able to say that if the person accepted the vow, you do not have to pay it back. If a person swore that he lost the pikadon, again, he lost that collateral, and then witnesses come and say he actually ate it, right? Let's say it was a cow and really he had a huge barbecue and he ate the cow. So then he has to pay back the value of that cow. If he admits that he ate the cow, so then not only does he have to pay it back, but he also has to pay a fifth, a chomesh, and bring the korban Asham. And that's only if he swore outside of court. If he says that it was stolen and he's lying, so now he has to pay kefal, right? He has to pay double, like a thief. If the plaintiff makes him swear, he does need to pay, but if the court imposed the oath, he does not need to pay afterwards. If the person admitted that they stole it, so then he does need to pay, even if he swore in court, if he admits that he lied, he does need to pay it back. If he claimed that the pikadon, that the collateral was stolen, so now he needs to pay back the value of that item. But if he says that it was lost, so then he's exempt. Let's say a person swears, I don't know why he would do this, but he swears 5 times that he didn't misappropriate the item, right? He didn't steal it or he didn't lose it. So he needs to pay a fifth, right? A chomesh, 5 times. Every time he swears falsely, he needs to pay that money, right? Because he could have admitted in between each time. And the fact that he doesn't admit it means he has to pay. If the custodian claims, again, the custodian is someone who is watching the item, if he claims that the item was stolen and really he stole it, so then, as we said, you have to pay double. If he sold it and killed it, right, or killed it, he has to pay 4 or 5 times. So the same thing as a regular thief. So to the person who is watching it, if he does the same thing, he also has to pay the same amount. But in all of these cases, he had to have sworn falsely beforehand in order to be liable. But a regular thief does not have to swear falsely in order to be liable to pay two, right, the double or the 4 and the 5. Okay, if the court found this person guilty for stealing it, and then he sells it or, right, slaughters it, he only pays double as a thief and not 4 or 5 times because he was already charged with a crime and found guilty of that crime. We don't add to his penalty. If he sells it or slaughters it before the verdict, then he does need to pay 4 or 5 times. If a person found an object on the street and then he claims that it was stolen, so now he needs to pay double, as if he stole it, because he did, right? He found it, but then because he's not returning the item, it's seen as if he, not as if, it's seen that he has stolen it. Okay, if a person says that the pikadon that he had was stolen, he's only liable to pay for it if he denies partial and admits partially. And right, he only takes an oath if he denies part of it. But if he denies completely, he's believed because he wouldn't be so brazen to deny it in front of the owner. Daf 107 tells us that if he denies it partially, then we make him take an oath because he's thinking, you know what, I'll admit to part of it, then I'll have time to get more money and pay him back later. Therefore, the Torah makes him swear, so he will admit to the whole amount. All of this is about a loan. But for a pikadon, again, for an item that he was in possession of, he will lie completely, meaning you'll say, I gave you my watch, and he'll say, no, you didn't. And in that case, we say that he will, you do take an oath, even if he lies completely. Here, the Gemara talks about the 4 custodians, the 4 watchmen. We're going to see this all over Nizikin, right? The person who is basically doing you a favor, right? Shomer chinam, he's not getting paid for it, right? You say, can you just watch my, I don't know, right? Can you watch my shopping cart? I'm going to get my car. That's a shomer chinam. You're not paying the person. They're just doing you a favor. Then there's shomer sachar, when you pay somebody to watch something of yours. Then there's the shoel, somebody who borrows something. And the socher is somebody who rents something. Each one of these people is responsible in a unique sort of way because of the level of responsibility that they have to an item. So these 4 shomrim need to deny, if they deny part and admit to part, then they take an oath, then they're liable to pay back, as we've mentioned before. And this is all learned from the biblical verses. Okay, let's say somebody says, again, I have something of yours, but it was stolen from me. You're only liable if he misused it on his own. But if he didn't use it, so then he's exempt from paying back, because in essence, stealing it needs to involve some sort of action because he already had it in his possession. Let's say a shomer says, oh, no, your cow, you're like, okay, I need my cow back. And he says, oh, it got lost. I'm so sorry. And then he takes an oath to say that it was lost. And then he's like, you know what, really, it was stolen. And then he takes another oath. I swear it was stolen. It was stolen. I don't have it. And then witnesses come and say that he lied. So now he's exempt from paying double, right? We don't see him as a thief, maybe because he stole it already in the first case, not in the second statement, but already in the first statement, which was before the second oath. Because he stole it before he actually stole it, he wouldn't be liable. Or the Gemara says, no, the reason is because the owner accepted his first oath. If you remember, we said it before, if the owner accepts the oath, then the person is exempt from paying anything after that. Okay, let's say, again, somebody says that an item was stolen that they, again, had as a collateral, as pikadon. If he used the item, so he does not pay double, or maybe he takes an oath that he didn't use the item, and only then does he not pay double. And then the Gemara says, no, he still doesn't pay double in any scenario in this case, because he had it as a pikadon, and therefore he didn't, even though he did misappropriate it, he didn't steal it because it came into his possession in a permissible way. Daf 108 tells us that if a person swore that the item was stolen and then swears that it was lost, right? The case beforehand was that it was lost and then it was stolen. Here he says stolen and then lost. And now witnesses come and say that he was lying, really he stole it. And then he admits that he lied for the second time as well. So now the question is, does he pay a fifth? Is he exempt because he needs, this time he does need to pay double because he originally said that it was stolen, but really he stole it, therefore he needs to pay double. And if he needs to pay double, maybe he doesn't pay a chomesh, which is a fifth, or because he swore, so now he pays double. Sorry, 1 second. Because he swore, and now he pays double, he's exempt of the paying the fifth. So that's the question in the Gemara. So the Gemara says that when you pay double, when you pay kefel, you don't pay the fifth. Again, paying the fifth is when you swore falsely and then you admit to it. So you pay a fifth plus the korban. This is not a regular theft case where you're paying double. So now the Gemara asks, if let's say two people claim it was stolen, and then one swears and then admits, and then one swears, and then eight witnesses come and say that he stole it. So again, one person admitted, and one person is testified against. So does the one person pay kefel, and then the other person pay a chomesh, a fifth, right? One is going to pay the double, and one is going to pay the fifth. And the Gemara says teku. We don't have an answer to that question. Let's say the person swears, but admits, and then they do it again. They swear, and then they admit, right? Do they pay a fifth 2 times? Or again, let's say they swear, and then witnesses come, and that happens twice. Do they pay? And the Gemara says they pay kefel twice. So now the question is, do they pay double? Right, and the Gemara says they do pay both times. Okay, next case is if an unpaid custodian, right, that's the shomer chinam, right, an unpaid custodian swears that the item was stolen, and then he offered to pay for it anyway, right? The person just feels bad, and they say, you know what, I'll just pay for it. Then when the thief is found, meaning he's not the thief, when the thief is found, so then the double payment goes to the owner because he stole the money. Or maybe it goes to the custodian, right? Because do we say that because the custodian already swore that he didn't do it, now the rights are transferred to the owner and the owner gets the money? Or do we say because the custodian paid for it, does he now get the double payment from the thief? Okay, if he says, so again, a similar case, the unpaid custodian says that it was stolen or lost, and then he pays the value, but now he doesn't swear. The double, the kefel, goes to the custodian because he's the one who paid the money. If he swore and didn't pay, so then the kefel, the double, goes to the owner because he swore, he took himself out of the equation and he didn't pay for it. If a thief admitted to stealing an item to the custodian, to the shomer, but not to the owner, so now what's the case? If the shomer swore truthfully, then the thief is exempt from paying double, right? Because we see that the custodian is truthful. But if the shomer lied, right? If he lied, so then, right, he says the animal died. And now really it was stolen. So now the thief admitting to him doesn't exempt him from paying double, right? He's not the shomer because he lied, is now not an extension of the owner, and he takes himself out of the equation. Okay, let's say again, the shomer, the custodian, pays for the stolen item without taking an oath. Then the thief admits to stealing it to the owner. So then the shomer sues the thief right, for the money because he wants the money. And then the thief denies it. And now, just to make it more complicated, the shomer brings witnesses that shows that the thief is lying. So now, does the admission to the owner count or not? And again, the Gemara says teku. We don't have an answer to this question. Let's say that, again, the pikadon, the collateral, was stolen in an unavoidable way. Right, the shomer couldn't avoid it, or the person who had it. And then they find the thief. So the shomer chinam, the unpaid custodian, can swear that it was stolen, or he can go and sue the thief for the item, right? He can say, give me that item back. A shomer sachar, right? If someone was being paid to watch the item, he must get the item back. Or maybe both of them need to get the item back. It's a machloka. 1 second. Okay. Next. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 108. Let's say the owner comes and says, where is my pikadon, right? I gave you a gold watch, where is it? And then the person says, oh, it got lost. And then he takes an oath, I swear it got lost. Then witnesses come and say he's lying. So this person needs to pay back the value, the keren, the value of the item, and that's it. If he admitted on his own that he swore falsely, he also needs to pay a fifth plus bring a korban asham. Okay, if he says, so that's if he says it was lost. If he says it was stolen and then swears falsely, and then witnesses come, so then he needs to pay back double because now he stole it, so he has to pay back double. If he admits it, if he admits it, he pays back but he doesn't pay back double. He pays back the value, the keren, plus a fifth, a chomesh, plus the asham. Let's say a person steals from his father and then swears falsely, and then the father dies. So now he inherits the money. So he pays the fifth and brings the sacrifice. And then he pays the value of the item or the money to the other brothers, right? To the other kids who inherited from the father. So he has to pay that money to his brothers. Or if he doesn't have any brothers, to his uncles. But basically anybody who inherits the father, he needs to pay that money back to him. If he can't pay it back, so then he needs to borrow money, and then the lender can take the money that he inherited, that was his share in the stolen item, right? Again, let's say he steals $100. Now the father dies, and let's say he inherits, right, $2,000. $100 of that, or part of it, is from the money that he stole. So he cannot get any benefit from that money. He needs to pay the $100 to the other brothers. Let's say a father says to his son, you cannot have any benefit from me. So in this case, we actually did this, I think, in Nadarim. If he says you can't have any benefit from me, the son can inherit him, meaning when he dies, he can inherit him. If he says you can't benefit from me when I die, so now he cannot inherit any money from the father. And if he needs to return the property, again, he can borrow money, and then the lender takes the money from his share because he can't inherit from his father. Okay, Daf 109 tells us in the Gemara, the Gemara says, even if the money, okay, we started with, okay, so we say, even if the money was going to go to tzedakah, to charity, it still has to be returned. And then the Gemara asks, can't the person forgive the loan? Meaning the father died, the son basically inherits the money and the right, the fact that he stole from the father. So now the Gemara says maybe the child can now say, oh, I forgive myself. I don't have to pay myself back. The Gemara says, no, you can't forgive the debt to yourself, even if, right, he's the heir to the estate. He cannot forgive the loan. However, the Gemara says this is actually a machloket. Some say he can forgive it. Right, so and it brings the case of if a person steals from a convert and then the convert dies and doesn't have any heirs, so then you give the money to a Kohen, to a priest. Okay, or maybe the case is that, let's say he didn't really die, and then the convert turns the money that he owes, that he stole from him, into a loan, and then he died. So then you have to pay it back. Again, here's the question. It's a machluket if you can forgive the return of a stolen item. Or no, you always have to return that item. Okay, another question is, there's a machloket if you can forgive something to others, right? Can I forgive a little bit, or maybe only to yourself, or maybe you can only forgive others, but you cannot forgive yourself. Forgive here, sorry, just to remind us, forgive means say you don't owe me any money. We're not talking about forgiveness, we're talking about forgiving a loan, saying that the person does not have to pay the loan back. Let's say a person stole, again, we said that if a person stole from a convert and then he dies, leaving he doesn't leave anyone to inherit him, right? Again, a Jew or a person who's born Jewish will always have a distant relative, because even if they don't have children or they don't have brothers, right, they have uncles or cousins, right? There's always somebody. But a convert doesn't have any of those familial relations, right? He would have a spouse, right? Children, but other than that, they don't have cousins and things like that. And therefore, if that convert dies without any heirs, so then you give the money to a Kohen. This is based on the verse that God acquires the item and gives it to the priest. The Gemara asks, what about a female convert? Is it the same law? The question is only because, not that we would think it would be different, but the verse says, ish, right, a man. So the Gemara is asking, when you said ish, did you really mean just ish? Or were you using the word more generally, meaning any convert, you're going to give the money to the Kohen? So we say it is the same law, the same thing. You look for relatives, and if you don't have any relatives, you give it to the Kohen. Which Kohen do you give it to? You give it to the Kohen who's on duty in the temple when the person brings the sacrifice. So when they bring the sacrifice, they also bring the money or the item, and that goes to the Kohen. Let's say the thief is a Kohen. Can he just keep it? So the Gemara says, no, you can't just keep the item because you're a Kohen. You need to give it to the Kohen that's on duty in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. You cannot keep it. However, what's interesting is that in general, if a Kohen, a priest, goes to the temple to bring a sacrifice, and let's say it's not his shift, he can go and do the sacrifice himself, and he gets to keep whatever the priests would be keeping from this sacrifice, whether it's the hide or the meat, he actually can keep it. But with a theft, we say, no, that belongs to all the Kohanim that are on duty, and it gets split to all the Kohanim that are on duty in that time. And we just said that the Kohen, again, the Kohen who comes to sacrifice their own sacrifice, they can keep all the meat and the hide, even if it's not his shift. Daf 110 teaches us that if the priest is old or sick, he can appoint someone else to do it for him, but they get to eat the meat. He does not get to eat the meat because he didn't do the sacrifice. He doesn't partake in the meat. But if the Kohen is impure and needs to bring a communal sacrifice, and let's say all the priests that are on duty are either impure or they're blemished and they cannot do the sacrifice, so then the impure person does the service, and then the blemished one eats it, because the blemished one is not allowed to do the service, but they are allowed to eat the sanctified meat, whereas the impure Kohen is not allowed to eat the sanctified meat. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 110 teaches us that if you steal from a convert, again, we saw this already, but here's the Mishnah, that if you steal from a convert and swear falsely, and then he dies, so then you pay the principal value plus a fifth to the priest, and you bring the sacrifice, the korban Asham. If the robber dies, so then the money goes to his heirs. Right, so again, if he gives it to the Kohen for atonement, normally he would give it to the Kohen for atonement, but now that he's dead, there's no atonement, and therefore the heirs of the thief get to keep the item or the money because he doesn't need atonement anymore, he died already. And the sacrifice, the Asham, goes to pasture till it gets a blemish, and then it's sold, and the money is donated to the temple. Okay, right, because you cannot sacrifice the animal because the owner is not around anymore. So because he died, you cannot sacrifice that animal anymore. If he gives the money to the priest, and then the person dies without giving the sacrifice, so then again, so now here the heirs cannot ask for the money back. Once you give it to the Kohen, it's the Kohen's, that's it. If he gave the money to, so now we're going to talk about the different shifts, right? We know that every week was another shift of Kohanim. They switched on Shabbat, meaning they didn't travel on Shabbat, but the new shift came in on Shabbat and the old shift ended on Shabbat. So let's say, again, there's two parts of atonement. One is paying back the money, and one is bringing the sacrifice. Let's say he gave the money to the first shift of priests, and then he brought the sacrifice to the second shift, right? Like the next week. So the Gemara says this is still valid. That works. But if you did it the opposite, you gave the korban first and then the money. If they didn't sacrifice the animal yet, and it's still around when he returns the money, so then it's valid, right? It has to still be around. But if the animal was already sacrificed, it is not valid. And he would have to bring another animal. But it's important to realize that the chomesh, the fifth, isn't essential to atonement, and therefore that could be paid later or before. That doesn't matter. Okay, that was all the Mishnah. So now the Gemara teaches us that the money must be given to the priest during the day, not at night, because again, the regular working hours of the temple are during the day, and it needs to be paid in full. And this is all based on a verse. A person must pay enough money so that each Kohen on duty gets at least a pruta. Again, pruta being our lowest denomination. If it's less, so then he needs to add from his own money to make sure that every Kohen gets at least a pruta. Okay, and we're not sure if maybe he could give it to a smaller shift of Kohanim, maybe the next shift that's coming on duty. Maybe he can say, oh, that only has 10 people as opposed to 20 people, so I'll give it to them to make sure I don't have to pay any money. Kohanim are not allowed to exchange their portion of this, right, what they're getting here for another one, right? Like, I'll give you my share of this, so next time you give me your share, right? You're not allowed to do that. So now the question is, are the Kohanim seen as heirs, right? Are they inheriting from the convert, or are they just getting a gift? If they're heirs, again, this back to the case that we started with, if the person stole chametz and now it doesn't have any value because it's after Pesach. So if they're heirs, you can just return it. But if it's seen as a gift, you can't give a gift that doesn't have any value. Therefore, you would have to pay extra money. Or even if it is a gift, you can still return it. Okay, since we're talking about gifts to the Kohanim, the Gemara actually lists the 24 gifts that were given to the Kohen. There are 10 gifts that are given in the temple. There are 4 that are given in Jerusalem, and 10 that are given all over Eretz Yisrael. And we see that all of these things are called gifts. So the Gemara brings this as a proof that it's called a gift and not an inheritance. Okay, as we said before, it's 2 parts to the atonement, right? Returning the money and bringing the sacrifice. If, let's say, you only paid half, if the question is, do you get like half atonement if you just returned the money and then the person died and couldn't bring the sacrifice? So the Gemara says, yes, there is such thing as half atonement. Okay, daf 111, our last daf for tonight. The money and the korban need to go to the same shift, even though we saw that that was not necessarily the case, right? If not, right, so here the Gemara says, if it's not going to the same shift of Kohanim, so then the money needs to go to the shift that got the sacrifice. Right, so basically the shift that got the money has to give it to the shift that got the sacrifice. Or maybe the sacrifice has to go to where the money went, and that group has to give it to the other family of Kohanim. So here, the Gemara gives a case where you gave the sacrifice to Yehoyariv, that's one of the Kohanim family, during their shift, and then you gave the money to Yedaya during Yehoyariv's shift, meaning in the same week you gave you gave the sacrifice to the shift that was on call, but then you gave the money to the next shift, even though it wasn't their shift yet. And because it wasn't their shift, they need to give the money back to the Kohanim that are on duty at that time. If the one that's on shift, right, on call, if they already sacrificed the sacrifice before the money was given, so then the thief has to bring another korban, right? It's not enough. If the watch concluded and they didn't ask for the money, right? The other shift didn't ask for the money, then they basically waived their rights to the money. If both shifts finished and nobody asked for the other thing, then the money goes to the shift that got the sacrifice. That's the way it needs to go. And again, the verse teaches that the money needs to precede the korban. You cannot get atonement till the money is returned. Also, if you stole from Hekdesh, if you stole from the temple, right, this is called Me'ilah. If you did Me'ilah, you must return it and bring a sacrifice to get atonement. But the fifth, again, is not essential for atonement. Okay, that is the end of the 9th chapter. I think we'll just start the next chapter. We're still talking about theft. The Mishnah teaches us that if a person stole something and then feeds his children with it, so it's not around anymore, or maybe he leaves it to them as an inheritance, the children, do not have to pay the original owner. If it has a warranty on it, meaning if it's something that's not disappearing, like a house or land, right? You can't eat a house or land, so then they do have to return it. So the Gemara explains that if the owner didn't despair, right? We learned this before, the concept of Yeush. Yeush means despair. If the owner didn't despair, so then he can collect the money from the robber or from a third party. So this seems to say that but that our Mishnah is even after Yeush, where so our Mishnah is therefore after Yeush, because he despaired. They do not have to pay him back, and they can, they already ate it, so obviously they can keep their money. So our Mishnah implies that inheritance is like you're buying an item, right? You don't need to pay the money back if you find out that it was stolen. Or maybe not, it's not the same thing. Or maybe our Mishnah, what's the reason they don't have to pay it back? It's because they already ate the food. Therefore, they can't return the cow if they already have the barbecue, right? And they don't have to pay because they didn't steal it. Why would you penalize them? They didn't steal the cow. If they still have the cow, right there, it is right for the children to return it if it still exists. But it's interesting, the Gemara says that they need to return it for the honor of their father. But technically, they really don't, right? If it doesn't exist, then they do not need to pay the value back. And of course, as we said, this is after Yeush. If the owner did not despair and they're still looking for their cow, then they do need to give back the cow. Again, if the cow is still there, it's before the barbecue, and the person is walking around, where's my cow, where's my cow? The children do need to return the cow. Okay, so I think we are going to end for this evening. And next week, we're going back to our regular time of Wednesday night. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom, and looking forward to learning with you next week as well.